Hello and welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Kerri Maher, author of Summer of Love. Kerri, welcome.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to start with maybe a little bit of context. We get so many portrayals of hippies and the late 1960s San Francisco counterculture, but can you tell us a little bit of what it actually was versus what we see in film and TV?
Wow. So I grew up in California, and my parents, who are also native Californians, met as undergraduates at UC Berkeley in the 1960s. So my whole upbringing was full of the real life, firsthand stories of this period of time. And, honestly, what I really took away from that background, is that there were many ways of experiencing the 1960s. Yes, the kind of the counterculture revolution and the hippies and the Haight-Ashbury have become the most famous, and that definitely existed and plays a big part in my novel, Summer of Love. But there were also plenty of people just going about their own lives and, not partaking in any of that, right? My mom was in a sorority. She wore, like A-line dresses and knee-high socks. And, my dad was an engineering major who went on to business school. Um, they were, I guess, what they would have been called straights, my parents. And so, but, they saw everything and to some extent experienced all the famous things like the beginning of the free speech movement on the Berkeley campus, the explosion of, drugs and, peace signs and war protests that were happening on both sides of the San Francisco Bay.
So tell us about the characters you've created to show us this time and place. We have Winnie and Miranda, two sisters. One embraces the counterculture, one does not. Tell us a little bit about them.
Yeah, so this is their sisters. They are in their very early 20s when their part of the novel opens in 1967. Winnie has just graduated from college. Miranda had graduated a few years ago. Winnie went to UC Berkeley and immediately moves across the Bay Bridge to San Francisco, where she's living. She's trying to kind of make it as a writer. She's freelancing. She really wants to publish poetry, though. That's kind of really her thing. Um, and her sister, older sister Miranda, who she's very close to, is busy kind of a few hundred miles up the coast, trying to run the family vineyard, which she sort of inherited from when their father died many years before. So Miranda went to UC Davis, which has UC Davis has always been famous for its ag department. In fact, it sort of started, I shouldn't say that. I don't actually know the exact history. It's always been known to people in California as the place to go if you wanted to study anything in agriculture. And even more specifically, they've always had an enology degree. So you could literally major in winemaking. And that's still true. They still have this degree. And so that's where Miranda went in the 60s. And she learned all about winemaking at UC Davis. And then she sort of brings this knowledge back to the family winery and is determined to make California wine that rivals French wine.
And what did you learn about winemaking and running a winery?
So much, so much. It was really fun to learn what I did. I'm not a super science person, so a different kind of writer researching this book probably would have gotten much more deeply into this kind of the science of winemaking because it really is. It's an art and a science. I think I leaned more into the art aspect and the kind of aesthetic aspect. The winery is in this on this mountain called Spring Mountains, which is a real place in Napa, which is it's sort of it's set into the hills and you have to do this treacherous drive to get up to it. And the reason I said it there is because in my research for this book, I went to this part of California and I drove around and I tried to like soak it all up. And I wound up on this road sort of by accident. And I'm not a super confident driver on like windy, treacherous roads. And I was just like, I'm sweating on my steering wheel going, well, I have to use this in my book somehow. So I wound up setting their winery there.
Nice little detail that you probably never expected to, your own experience to be able to fit it into the novel that way.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about Dawn and the 2015 timeline. She is it Miranda's daughter?
Yes.
And what is her role in this narrative?
Yeah. So, okay. So I think I didn't fully answer your previous question, which is so the Winnie and Miranda are like very close sisters who grow apart for a bunch of different reasons, which we will not discuss because they are spoilers in the, spoilers. But Dawn is Miranda's daughter, and Dawn, as soon as we open the book, she's struggling with her drinking, and she's super like she doesn't want to admit it to her mother because her mother, Miranda, who does not have a drinking problem, in fact, barely drinks at all, even though she runs one of the most famous California wineries. Um, she doesn't want to have to admit this to her mom. And she winds up, but one of her best friends, one of her oldest friends, has been sober for like 8 years. And so they have all kinds of interesting conversations about drinking and not drinking and what is sobriety really. It's more than just not drinking. And um, so the Dawn storyline, which stays in July of 2015. Ultimately, that the other timeline that starts in 1967 meets that 2015 storyline later in the book. But so in addition to Dawn kind of struggling with her drinking, she also goes on this road trip adventure with the friend I just mentioned, looking for the author of this famous series of they're sort of children's, like Harry Potter type children's novels called the Vineland novels. And the Vineland novels are written by an anonymous author. No one knows who she is. But Dawn and her friend Audrey wind up going on a road trip to find the author of the Vineland novels.
So you have a dual timeline here. Was that always when you outlined this, was that always going to be the case? And yeah, and was that hard to develop to make sure that it overlapped correctly? Can you talk a little bit about the craft of intertwining those two stories?
Yeah, so I tend to write chronologically, and so my last novel didn't have multiple timelines, but it had multiple points of view, like this one does. And when I wrote that one, I wrote, one character, the next character, the next character, one character, the next character, the next character, sort of as they wound up kind of unfolding over the course of the book. With this one, I tried to do it that way. So I tried to kind of write the past storyline and then write one of the 2015 chapters. But it just was not working for me. I kept losing momentum in both of the storylines. So I eventually just wrote the whole past storyline and then the whole contemporary storyline. And then I figured out where the intersections were and then I braided them together.
That's interesting. One of our authors at History Through Fiction, Jillian Forsberg, she writes dual timelines. She says that's the only way she can do it is to write one timeline first and then next timeline second, and then find out where to highlight the connections.
Yeah, it's really people who do multiple timelines, they some writers have done it both ways. I think most writers wind up with like a favorite way of doing it. And when you really have a favorite way of doing it, you can't fathom doing it the other way.
Mhm. Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the more sensitive issues such as alcoholism, addiction, mental illness. Were those challenging to make kind of authentic and meaningful without stereotyping or stigmatizing any of those issues?
Um, well, I'm glad I didn't do that because I definitely didn't want to. I'm not sure it was difficult because in the end, I'm really writing about people, my characters. And so the trick, I think, always is to writing a book that is compelling and doesn't have like cliches or stereotypes, is to really get to know your characters very, very well so that you're just writing about people. Um, and and so I think that's just how I go about doing it. And it takes me a few drafts, right? It takes me a few drafts to like really get to the book that you're reading, that really has these fully realized, developed humans on the page. Um, but the other thing is I think I would never approach any of these subjects from a kind of like a cliche or stereotype perspective because I've lived some of these things myself and people close to me have. And so I think I see people with these particular struggles as many dimensional people, and I just wanted to make sure I captured that in this novel.
And to kind of create that deep characterization, do you have any kind of exercises or practices or like writing background scenes you never intend to use? I hear a lot of authors saying that the characters just come alive in their head and start telling them what to say and do. Does that happen with you?
That absolutely happens with me, 100%. I also started the practice I'm about to describe with my last novel. So my first three historical novels were about real people. And so when I sat down to actually write those books, I had done all this research about them. So I knew a lot about them. And in the cases of those books, it was sort of like there was this weird moment where I was doing, I was sort of finishing with my research, or I had done enough research, and then the characters really did just start talking to me and saying, time to put us in a scene. Like, this is the scene you're going to write us in. But my last book and this book had entirely fictional characters. And my editor at some point with my last book said, Kerri, I wonder if you should try and write like a short biography of each of your main characters to really sort of get to know their backstory better. And I did it, and it was really helpful. And so I did it for my previous novel. And before I even started writing Summer of Love, I wrote those biographies. And the book I'm writing now, I've also done it. What I am finding though is that I am you've heard the terms pantser and plotter, right? Like, do you write by the seat of your pants, or do you plot everything else ahead of time? I am inherently a pantser, which is sort of weird because in my real life, like as a regular human going about her life, like I love lists and I love organization and I like to know what's going to happen. So it's weird to me in my writing life, I'm actually a pantser. Like I discover what the book is really about by writing the book. And then I go back and revise with those things in mind. So even though I write these biographies before I start, and they are helpful, a lot of key details do wind up changing as I write the book.
So it sounds
Um,
like you've developed a pretty steady routine then,
yes.
draft one to two to three, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the other sort of part of my overarching process is that I write one draft, which is like the draft no one else sees but me. And then I go back in and I make that's where I discover sort of what the book is about, right? Then I go back and I make some changes based on what I now understand the book is about. Then that draft is the draft that goes to my first batch of beta readers. So these are trusted readers who are often also writers who can give me comments and help me brainstorm and get the book to the next level. So then I do that. I take all that feedback. I have all those conversations, and I go back and I pretty substantially usually revise the book. Then I give the book to another group of readers for more comments. And then usually then I'm pretty close. That's not usually a huge revision. That's usually a little bit like some changes here and there, some polishing. And then that third fully realized draft is the one I give to my agent, my editor. And then my editor makes her own comment. And then my editor and I tend to go another few rounds of that type of, she gives me comments, I make some changes. She gives me some more comments, I make some changes. And then finally it goes to copy edits. And I have
Hmm. So you're speaking about this in a pretty pragmatic fashion. I'm curious, did it take you a while to get to that point where you could separate yourself and your emotions from putting this out and giving it to people and getting responses to it?
There are some people who love me very much who would say that my emotions are still very much involved. Um, I mean, yeah. So I have always sought feedback on my writing, always. And I did ultimately get a master's of fine arts, and so that's all about feedback on your writing. Um, and I have at various points been very frustrated by feedback I've gotten on my writing. And I've also taught a lot of writing. And what I've come to realize about feedback is it is so important to give and receive feedback back that is telling you what you do well first. Because if feedback is just telling you all the things you need to work on, it's demoralizing and will make you feel very defensive. Not just me, like anybody. So, when I'm teaching writing, I subscribe to I like require my students to do like the compliment sandwich, like lead with what this writer did well, then talk about things that they need to work on, and please offer specific suggestions. Don't just say, you didn't do this well. Say, this could use some work and you might want to try this. And because I have this kind of like theory of feedback, we'll say, that's what I look for in my own readers. So like the readers who are reading my work do that for me. They tell me what is working, and then they help me figure out how to improve the rest of it.
Just speaking as an editor, I mean that's an art form in itself, giving
Is
feedback that doesn't tear them down so much that they can't don't you want them to feel invigorated to go back in, but you got to
right.
be honest too. It's can be kind of tricky.
It is. It's hard. And if there are editors out there listening, please know that your writers care a lot about what you say. So please, please, please tell us what we're doing well. Not enough writers, not enough editors do it. It's kind of shocking.
Can you take us back to before this was a job for you and you didn't know what it would be? I mean, I read in your bio somewhere you wrote your first novel in fifth grade and
Yes.
you were a writer from a very young age. But it sounds like you were pretty persistent. Can you just talk about getting to this point?
Yeah. So um I wrote my first unfinished novel in fifth grade. So I've been like, trying to be a writer for a long time. I wrote my first finished novel, like fully revised, finished novel when I graduated from college. So I was like 22 years old. And then it took me 20 years to actually sell a book. So I was 42 when I actually sold my first novel. And in that 20 years, I wrote 5 novels that were never published and never will be published. And I kind of did different genres. My first novel was like, a serious work of literary fiction. And then I also wrote a romance. I wrote a mystery. I wrote 2 young adult novels, one of which was a paranormal. And I learned so much about writing by doing all of that. And then I did this MFA program, and mostly I wrote short stories in my MFA program. So I've really tried my hand at a lot of different genres and types of writing. And all of that, when I finally landed on historical fiction, I brought all that I'd learned in those other genres to the novel that eventually sold, which was The Kennedy Debutante. And I really like to always emphasize that, like, not a single one of those unpublished words were wasted. Not a single word. I learned something from every draft. And, some of those drafts did actually get me things. Like my first novel got me into graduate school. It was my writing sample. The mystery novel got me my first agent, who sadly couldn't sell the book, but she was my agent for a while. Um, so, you know, it's nothing is wasted, and persistence really does matter. If you had told me at 22 that it was going to take me 20 years, I would have said, I'll quit before that. Um, but I didn't. Just I love writing. It's at some point I realized that writing was how I knew who I was, and it was how I processed things that were happening to me, and I was never going to not do it.
I think that's great, and congratulations on that. And I mean, I feel the same way. If I had known what I know now, I was so naive that I went ahead and started writing and publishing, and there's a lot to learn along the way, and you just don't know what you don't know.
You don't. And you know, if you're what you're learning is interesting to you and kind of and keeps your butt in the chair, that's what it's all about.
Can you tell us a little bit about your Substack? It seems like you're pretty active over there. What can readers find on your Substack?
Well, so compared to many Substackers, I'm not making a living on Substack. Let's just say that. Basically, I use it as a newsletter platform, um, to like let my readers know kind of what I'm up to and what's coming up. So like right now, my Substack is all about events for Summer of Love. Because I'm in a publication cycle right now. But when I'm kind of between books, I write a little bit about my process. If I do an interview, I might talk about, the interview. So that's what my Substack is really all about. And like I said, nothing right now is behind a paywall. So it's just, and I love Substack as a venue, an online venue. There's so many great writers over there, and I like reading other people's work, and I learn a ton from people on Substack. Are you on Substack?
I am, yep. It's just colinmustful.substack.com, and I've enjoyed it. I started mine about 2 years ago, and I share anything and everything related to my journey,
Yeah.
and people seem to it resonates with people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. It's a very friendly place.
Yeah. So was the tie-dye a stylistic choice?
Yes. Yes, it was. It was. I always like to thank you for noticing.
Uh-huh.
With every book, I like to, I like clothes. So I like to like get some special things for that relate to the theme of or the time period of the book. So right now I'm wearing tie-dye, but for most of my actual book events, I'm going to hold up the book. So for people watching us on YouTube, you can see it. There's a lot of red. So I'm going to wear a lot of red
Yes.
at my events.
Well, before I leave you, what can readers take away from Summer of Love aside from the history that we already talked about?
Um, well, um, I hope people learn about in fun ways about the history of this time period. And I hope that people also take away, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the addiction and recovery storyline, but I hope people also just take away that like this is just an experience that a lot of people have. And if there are people in your life that might be struggling, maybe you can understand them a little bit better. And maybe if you are struggling, you might read it and see that your life doesn't end if you choose to stop drinking. In fact, it might just be the beginning.
Very well said. Well, thank you, Kerri. Congratulations on Summer of Love. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about it, and congratulations on everything you've accomplished as a writer now.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you.